Hello, everyone. How's it going? Hello, hey, glad that you're back. Did I reduce the volume too much? No, we still have the background music. Yeah, cool. The music is just so that there's no awkwardness while we are talking. So, welcome back, everyone. How's everyone doing? This is what, day 3? Thursday, Friday, Saturday. Yeah, Sunday. Yeah. So yeah, technically day 3, I think. Depends on where you are. But anyways, welcome to part 3 of Music on the Web session, where we are building a clone of this Chrome Music Lab. Not so feature rich, but we are trying our best to ensure that it works. we are able to build something that works. So if you are new here, hello. If you're new here, then let me give you a quick overview of what we have done so far, what we have achieved so far, and where we are going next. So what we have done so far and what is this project about? Let's start from there. So we are building, as I said, a clone of a minimalistic clone, I would say, of this Chrome Music Lab Song Maker, which allows you to kind of create, play them. Okay. We will not have all these features, but there are a bare minimum features that we'll definitely have. One is example, of course, playing and pausing. The other is the tempo of how fast or slow the beats are going to be. Then different types of sounds. So in Chrome Music Lab, you have kind of uh, more options. You have strings, woodwind, synth, marimba, electronic blocks, kit, like just basically too many. And all of them are nothing but different waves, right? So we are going more basic, and we are saying that okay, sound can be made by some sort of vibrations, some sort of frequency, and those frequencies are nothing but a kind of a wave, where different kinds of waves will have different frequencies and they will produce different sound. Some of the common ones that we have seen is like sine, square, triangle, and saw. We also saw a diagram of it. Then 2 more buttons here. One is randomize. Once we have our grid created, similar to this one, instead of us putting all the bits, we can use the randomize feature, which will randomly assign bits or randomly color or select some of the boxes, and we can play them. And of course, the clear would be to clear those boxes. Okay, clear all boxes. Okay, so that is what we are doing. In terms of code, this is what we have technically. So not technically, this is actually what we have. We have 2 sections created till now. We have the section 1, where we have all these buttons and labels and input boxes, which will control what happens in section 2, which is the grid, right? So here before we ended the last session, we saw how to use JavaScript to create these grids. So we used a thing called as create element, document.create element, which creates a HTML tag element, which means that we can use JavaScript to create a div element, for example, which is what we did. We created a div element. After the section has been rendered, we created a div element and gave it a class grid layout. We have not styled it yet, but we can. Okay, so we created a class called as grid layout. Then we also inside, so now if we consider this grid layout as a parent, then inside that parent we created a child or with class name labels left side, which will show the labels or the tones, you may say, on the left hand side of the screen, and on the right hand side we'll have the grids. So in here you don't see the tones, but we will have we'll have 7 or 8 tones. Okay, uh also, why is this banner? Okay, we'll have 7 or 8 tones, where not 7 or 8, I think it would be C2, D2, E2, F2, G2, A2, B2, C3. Yeah, eight tones. Okay, so tones, or let's say you can call them pitch. Oh yeah, not let's not call them tones, let's call them pitches, because that's the correct name for it. So a pitch is like a music note. Okay, so it is like different, how do I explain it? Different frequencies of how high or low you're going. Example, if I have to say note names in music. I think this would be. So you can represent all the notes with some, like there's letters and some numbers. We are going for the base one, which is C, D, E, F, G, A, B, and then again C. C, D, E, F, G, A, B, and again C. So this is how your tones or notes would work, or pitches would work. And we are going for the base one, which is not very sharp, not very shallow, somewhere in the middle, which is all the C2 ones. So C2 would be basically 2 notes at a time, or 2 beats at a time, kind of. uh Need to find that image. Yeah, there we go. Perfect. So if I have to talk about uh yeah, the different notes or the different pitches, depending on how you call them, you can say that they are nothing but which part of, let's say, the piano in this case they refer to. So C1 is the first octave, then you have more bass, C2, then, and it goes shrill and shrill and shrill. Okay, so we are going to consider second octave for all of the music letters that we have. So we are going to go C, D, E, F, G, A, B, and again C. and we are going to focus on the second octave of it. So C2, D2, E2, F2, G2, A2, B2, and then C3, because we have moved from second octave over to the third octave of the piano. So yeah, these will be our notes that we create, and we are going to show. So this is exactly what I'm focusing on. You can have more of them, so you can create as many as you want. I'm going to focus on these three, sorry, not these three, these parts. So C2 to C3, this is what my focus is going to be on. And the reason why I'm saying that is because we are going to write those notes on the extreme left of our grid, so that it's easier to understand which note is being played right now. uh, Okay, and I will share this link for you to understand a bit of music, because who doesn't love music? You may hate songs, but music, I think everyone loves it. Okay, so we are going to show that. So that is why we created a labels left side. Uh, and between each of those things, we'll have a spacing and the label itself will be shown. And now we'll create the right hand side. We did all of this using JavaScript. So what we said, or what we saw yesterday, was we found how to get an element by ID on the grid. So even so, we got a reference to this particular section. Okay. Now remember the word reference because we'll use it later. Uh, but for the time being, just focus on this. Uh, we got a reference to this section using this ID called as grid. And we saw that we have to ensure that IDs are unique on a page, because if you don't have a unique ID on the page, that means you will only, if you have repeating IDs on the page, you will get a reference to the wrong HTML element, HTML tag, HTML parent, whatever you call it. So we need to ensure that this is unique. Once we got that, we said, okay, let's create an element inside this grid. Okay. And give it a class name of grid dash layout. So we created an element div and gave it a class of grid layout. A quick question for you all. Can you find how do I give it an ID? Can I give it an ID? And will that work? Oh, it does. Nice, right? So you can also give it an ID like this. So class name and an ID could be given like this. Uh, ID grid layout 1. Now labels left side, we created another div element and we attached it to its nearest parent. Who is the nearest parent to labels call? The layout, which is the first div that we created, the grid layout, right? So grid layout is the nearest parent to labels column, and we attached it to grid layout. Now then we created this ruler spacer and this row label, and ruler's spacer. Okay, who is the nearest parent to ruler's spacer? The labels column, which is labels left side. I should probably name it as labels left side or something. uh, Ignore it, we'll know it is a column. Okay, ruler spacer has the nearest parent as labels left side. And I say nearest parent because I want it to be a child of this particular parent. And for row label itself, I want it to be child of labels left side class thing, which is labels call. Okay. Actually, let me rename the variables a bit, because then it would make much more sense. Grid layout, we'll call it grid layout. And grid layout dot class name, grid layout dot id. Labels column is basically labels left side. Spacer is ruler spacer. Labels is nothing but a row label. So I'm trying to give it the same name as the class name that we have. Which one would this be? Labels is not defined. Yes, true. Labels left side. Row label. Layout is not defined. Where is layout? Oh, this should be grid layout. Perfect. No errors. Let's see. It still looks the same. Yep, it does. So all I did was just rename the variable so that when I make a reference to it, it makes much more sense. Like you can focus on the class name that is same as the variable. So the grid is this one. Then we have the grid layout element, which is this one, this grid layout. I'm going to give it an ID of grid layout as well. So they have the same class name and the ID, which is fine. Does not really make any difference right now. Then we have the labels left side variable, labels left side, which is attached to the grid layout. Labels left side is attached to the grid layout. So it's a child of grid layout. Then we have ruler spacer element, which is a child of labels left side. There we go. Then we have a row label, which is also going to be a child of labels left side. Row label, child of labels left side. So now see, now the variable names make much more sense, right? Okay, cool. So this is what we have done so far. Let me push this so that you all have the same variable names that I have. Okay, I've also moved all the append child uh, towards the bottom so that after everything has been done, so after the element has been created, after the class name has been assigned, after the ID has been assigned in this case, then you finally append the children as and where necessary. Okay, so ruler spacer left side, row label left side, but left labels left side itself is going to be a child of grid layout, and grid layout itself is going to be child of grid. And the ordering definitely matters, because if I take this Like if I assign grid layout before, it is going to cause so much confusion. Grid dot append child grid layout. Where is grid layout defined for the first time? Right here. And I remove it from here. Okay. For the time being, I think this would work out. But as and when we add more and more of it, the ordering will cause so many issues. So ensure that the ordering is proper, which means that do it append child as and when they need to be appended, or when everything else has been done, whatever you wanted to do before has been done, then follow the order. Okay, always follow the order and add it. And also my spacing is based on which elements are going to be together. So that is also one thing to kind of keep in mind. Makes it easier to understand, okay, these three things are together, then these two are together, together, together. And then labels left side will have this. Labels left side, since it is going to have two children, I've kept them together. Then grid layout is going to have one child, so there it is. And finally the grid, which is parent to all of these things, is right here. Okay, so what we did was git add all, git commit session 3, rename the variables, and git push. You can find all the code right here. Now, before we move ahead, it's been like 20 minutes since we started. I hope you all have registered, but if not, so this is the code. And if you have not registered, please do register. So this is the link to part 3 for you all to register. Also, let me increase the size. Everything should be visible. Uh, Something. Okay. Please do register before we move ahead. I have shown the link in the chat. Okay, perfect. Thank you so much for checking in. Okay, so what's next? So the next thing is we have created a few class names, but they are not styled yet. But also nothing is being shown on the grid itself. So we want to show some of the things on the grid itself, right? Uh, okay, let's start by create. Okay, what should we start with? Let me think. Okay, before we do that, let's take a step back. You see all these create element and append child calls? All these could be 100% improved if we had something of a reusable sort something which could ensure that you could reuse the bits. Okay, like let's say kind of create a function which could do this for us over and over and over again, and it would also ensure that we don't have to write these things multiple times, and we also don't miss out on adding a few things. Okay, so what I'm trying to say is create element, we can see there's a repetition, as after we create element we do this whole class name thing, where for every element that we have created we give it a class name. That class name transforms into a class in the HTML. No one asked me a question about it actually, which is very interesting, that why we call it class name here but it becomes a class here. uh, and that's okay if you haven't asked, I'll still try and explain it. So the reason why we call it class name and it becomes a class is because the class keyword itself is a reserved keyword in JavaScript. It is used to create JavaScript classes. uh, yeah, so it is let me come back on screen for this. So class keyword itself is a reserved keyword, same as the word const. Okay, the word const or the word let, these are reserved keywords. They are used by JavaScript itself to know what you're trying to say. Remember conventions, we talked so much about it. So what that means is if you try to create const and then also call your variable const equals 1, then it will be an error. It will be like, I know that the first const declares the type of the variable, that it is going to be a constant, it cannot be reassigned, but the variable name that you're using is also const. So this is where JavaScript gets confused. Like, what are you trying to say? Do you mean this is the type of variable declaration, or is this the type of variable declaration? So you have to say const number, let's say. So now that would work. Okay, because now this is the type of the variable declaration, this is the variable name, and this is the variable value. Cool. And this is the assignment. You can break it down into 4 parts. Similarly, the word class itself is also a JavaScript reserved keyword, which means that you cannot use the word class. And that is why in JavaScript, when we try to assign the word class in the HTML, so using JavaScript, we are assigning the word, or we are assigning a class name, a CSS class name to a HTML tag. It goes like, if you use the word class, then I won't understand, because are you trying to create or call this reserved keyword class? Yeah, I'll have to write this whole thing. No, I'm not interested. Sorry. Are you trying to create call this reserved keyword class? No. What you're trying to do is actually give it a HTML class name. Okay, and that is why this is the keyword that we use. You will observe, so the reason why I'm focusing so much on this, because when we move over to doing this whole thing in React, you will see that most of the words come from here. You will see, oh, in React also you need to call it class name, and now you know why, because that was a reserved keyword, right? It was a reserved keyword, and if it is a reserved keyword, you won't be able to call it because JavaScript would get confused. Okay, so I hope that makes sense. Any questions, anyone? Okay, let's move on. And cool. So as I was saying, Uh, Sorry, give me 1 second. Let me get my notes. Okay, perfect, proper. Whew, moving on. So as I said, this could be changed to a function which we could call repeatedly, right? So let's do that. Let's change this to a function which we could call repeatedly. Hmm. So what should we call the function? Step one, let's start by the syntax of the function. So a function can be declared using the keyword function. So uh, you can find JavaScript reserved words. Yeah, there we go. All the reserved keywords right here. Okay. You can find all the reserved keywords right here. So one of the reserved keywords is function. So a function is used to create a function. Okay, very simply. What is a function? A function can be a reusable piece of code which does something. Now, the idea of a function is that for the same input, you get the same output. Okay, for the same input, you get the same output no matter what. So we create, and these are called as pure functions. So for the same input, it gives the same output, and does not do much inside. It is not like if you give it something, it returns me something else for the first time. Like if you give it A, it returns A, but if you give it B, it returns D. That is an impure function. There is something magic going on there. But so that should not happen. Or if you return A in the morning, it returns A back. In the evening, it returns B back. Then it's not a pure function. You want your functions to be as pure as possible. For the same input, it should return the same output always. Okay, so that is what we are going to create. We are going to create a function which will help us to avoid these repeating create element calls. Okay, we're going to uh, yeah, create this function which will help us avoid this repeated create element calls, and it will also assign this class name to it. And later on, if we need, we can technically add few more things, but let's start with these two because you know how they look like. So let's call our function el. Okay, why? Because it is going to create an element and I do not want to confuse between document.create element and el. So I'm going to call it el. uh, hmm, yeah, I don't want to conflict between this create element and so when I say el, you know that I'm referring to the function, but when I say create element, I'm referring to this document.create element. Okay. uh, Now this function will need a few inputs. The first input that it will need is this tag name, right? So this tag name which we have for every create element, it needs a tag name. So let's give it a input tag name which will be a variable. Okay, so this variable, whenever we call el, the first variable that we will give it would be the tag name, and we can give it a second variable class name. Okay, so this class name goes over to this variable right here. Okay, now you can have a function which does not take any variable. So let me create a dummy function. we can do that on our song maker here. So let's say I create a function. Let's call it add to, let's call it hello. Okay, perfect. And it does not take any parameter. Okay, so this is called as parameter, or you can say that these are the input variables to this function. Currently it is empty. So a syntax of a function is function keyword, then the name of the function, which you can call anything. Let's say I'm calling it hello, then empty brackets, or brackets with something inside it, both of them valid. We'll check them out in a bit. So function hello, empty brackets, and then curly brackets. Now inside this curly brackets, you can do whatever you want. So I'm going to say, I'm going to console.log hello from GHW. We saw what is console log yesterday, and now I hit enter. So there's nothing that happens, but if I call the function, which is by doing hello and empty bracket, it returns hello from GHW. Okay, I can now enhance this function hello with name, and I can say that this takes an input of user name. Okay, so this is one word, username, or let's say just user. So now I have a new function hello with name, which takes one input user, and it will return me console.log hello plus the user that has come back, like that has been given as an input. So hello space plus user. And now if I call this hello with name, empty brackets, it says hello undefined because you did not provide me with the username. But if you give it if you give me a username, let's say MLH, then it will return hello MLH. Now I can enhance my function a bit more. I can say that instead of using this whole plus notation, you can just do hello user. And since user is a variable, we can wrap it in dollar and curly brackets. So this is another way of writing strings in so in this error, you have spelled the word console wrong. You have double N in your console. Okay, coming back. So hello with name 2. So I have a new function hello with name 2, which takes user, and it still console logs hello user. But now I can do this, and it returns hello 454. So my name is 454 for some reason, but it properly takes in that variable and returns me something. Okay, cool. The last thing that I want to show is instead of console log, you can use another keyword called as return, which will return the value. So I'm going to call hello with name 3, and I'll give it two parameters in user, comma, age. I'm giving it two parameters. And now instead of console log, I can remove the word console log and the bracket. Okay, I can keep the bracket if I want. Hello, user, full stop, your age is, and then I pass in the variable age. So I've removed the word console log and I've replaced it with the keyword, the function, the keyword return. Okay. And as you can see, all the reserved keywords are in this purple color. Perfect. Now let's call this hello with name 3. And this needs two arguments. Okay. It needs user and it needs age. I can say the user is uh, Chrome and the age is 30. And if I hit enter, now you see it returns hello Chrome, your age is 30. Perfect. So now you know all about functions. We saw what is a function and a console log here. When we call the function, it return if you don't provide it any parameter, and inside if you, let's say, return or log, okay, you can change this console log to return, and it will be like, okay, if I return just a single thing, you can call it, or you can get it printed hello without any parameters. Then you can also provide parameters and you can console log that. Then we saw another way of how you can write strings. So instead of using the plus notation, you can use this way of writing strings, which is with using backticks. Okay. uh, and we also saw how you can provide multiple parameters and use the return keyword. Now, one thing to note about return is that you can only return one thing at a time. Okay. So if I have a hello with name 4, which takes in user, age, and city, I want to return all three of them. So I cannot do return user or return you live in. Okay. If I do this and I call hello with name 4 and I give it my user, so same thing, I'll give it the same thing, but I'll also give it the city name. Where is it based in? SF or California? Now, if I hit enter, it only returns me the first part. It does not return me the second part. This is because you can only return one thing from a function. So you cannot return multiple things from a function. If you want to return multiple things, you need to build your string first. So what I mean here is, now inside here, I can say const my return value equals to, we will build all of this. Not full stop. Age, full stop, and initial, and then const second part. Let's call this first part. Const second part equals this bit here. Always use semicolon. Even though JavaScript does not care about it, you should always use semicolon. And now I can join them or even add a enter. Okay. So let's start with first doing return first part plus second part. So now we have joined the two bits. So now if I do hello with name 4, is it? There we go. It joins all of them. Hello Chrome, your age is 30, you live in California. We have joined the two parts. You could technically also add them together, but I'm going to do one more thing. What if I want enter in between the first part and second part, I can use a backslash n, which means backslash new line. So now if I call that function again, that is a problem. I should probably add it here. I'm confused. It should be backslash n. Uh, let's see. I am confused. It should have been backslash n or backslash. Ah, I am not going to sweat on it right now. Ideally, one of these should have worked as a new line, unless there's something weird going on with respect to console. It should not be the case, ideally. Okay, not going to focus on the new line. I'll have to Google that bit. As in my opinion, that should have worked. Uh, but anyways, also the last thing that I wanted to talk about is a backslash curly brackets. So you can have backtick, not backslash, backtick curly brackets first part, curly brackets space curly brackets second part. So this is following the same idea that inside the backticks you can have a variable. So that's what we are doing. Inside the backticks we can have the variable, and now if I call the hello with name 4, there we go, still returns the same thing. Okay, so what have we learned? We can create a function without parameters, we can create a function with parameters, we can return a value from a function, and we can only have one return from a function. Okay, these are the most important things to know. And following that idea, now let's go over to our function that we were creating to create do two tasks together. The tasks are creating a element and giving it a class name. So that is why the element that we are creating, it's basically using a HTML tag. So that is why we pass it the tag here, and another variable that it will take as an input, or another parameter to this function is going to be class name. Now inside this, let's write our like write some logic. So const node, or let's say HTML tag, equals to document dot create element with the tag name. Let's call this HTML element. So the HTML element that will be created would be based on the document.create element with this particular tag. Okay, this HTML tag. And on this HTML element, we will call the class name and provide it CSS class. Yeah, perfect. So what are we doing? We are doing this exact thing, which is dot class name, and assign it to a value. That value is going to be this CSS class parameter. So tag is going to be this bit, is going to be this particular bit, and the CSS class is going to be this particular bit, and that will repeat for everyone. And finally, we can return the HTML element from here, from this function. Okay, now let's try it out. I'm going to comment these two lines, control forward slash or command forward slash, and I'm going to say const grid layout equals EL. Let's call the function, and it needs a tag and it needs a CSS class. So I'm going to give it two things. I'm going to give it the tag, which was the div tag, and comma, I'm going to give it grid layout. And I'm also going to comment this ID thing. So let me take this down. Perfect. So now my grid layout is calling one line of a function which does the job of two lines. Div should be created and a grid layout should be created. So if I go over to my project and I see a div created with a grid layout, that means my thing has been successful. And actually it is. If I reload this, there's a div with class grid layout. Perfect, it works. Now instead of a div, what if I change it to span? So now I should have a span with grid layout. So inside section 2, yeah, there we go. There's a span with grid layout. Instead of grid layout, what if I call it grid layout blah, blah, blah? Yeah, there we go. So our function works, right? Now we can technically create anything. We can replace all of these things, okay, all of these create element and class name with a single line function call for everything. One last thing that I want to check is this ID. Now I have assigned an ID only to this grid layout, not everything else, right? So I can provide it an optional of ID attribute, but only if it exists, then we want to call this thing, like then we want to do this kind of work. If it does not exist, we want to ignore it. So now this is where we get into conditions. Okay, so the condition is that if ID attribute exists, sorry, a big sneeze. So the condition is that if ID attribute exists, in that case, we want to do HTML element dot ID equals to that ID attribute. Okay, else we are going to ignore it. So this is an if condition. So if it is your first time working with an if condition, you now know, like, how do you read it? You read it as if and this variable has a value. So ID attribute currently has, like, we are basically checking if this has a value or not. If it has a value, we don't care what is the value. All we care is if it has a value. So this line is basically that shorthand way of checking if ID attribute has a value. If it does have a value, then HTML element.id, which is basically this grid layout.id, where grid layout is nothing but a common random HTML element, right? So if HTML element, so if ID attribute has a value, which means if a third parameter is passed, grid layout ID, if a third parameter is passed to it, it will assign it to this ID, else it will ignore it. Okay, so only grid layout. But if we don't add this condition, if I don't have this condition, what do you think will happen? And I don't pass it, and I don't have the condition, it will assign the ID as undefined. So we'll have a lot of undefined ID in our code. And remember, ID is supposed to be unique and it's not supposed to be undefined. So that is why we add the condition. Okay. Now, based on that logic, we should also check for the class name itself. Okay. And even the tag name, right? So let's do that. We can say that if there's a tag name, then do all of this. So if there is a tag, then do all of this. But even if you have a tag and you have an ID, then assign this ID. I can have another if condition here saying that if there is a CSS class, then do this particular bit, which is assign it to a class name. So now if I don't provide a CSS class and I just provide a div with a div, there we go. There's a div without a CSS class. If I do give it a CSS class, then I will have a div with class of grid layout. If I give it an ID as well, grid dash layout dash 1, it will now assign ID as well. If I don't give it an element, then well, it's stupid to call this function, right? Because the whole point of this function is that you create a tag. So actually, I'm going to remove this function because, yeah, it's overkill. Okay, that's the word here. That it's overkill if you do that. Like if you're calling this function and you don't give it a tag name, then why are you even calling this function? Okay, now finally, one last thing before we move ahead. If I hover over this EL, it says that it is a function where tag colon any CSS class colon any ID attribute colon any, which means it returns something. Like all of them are any. And if you are new to this project, if you have not heard, if imagine that you have not heard anything that I have been saying so far, you cannot actually understand what this EL does unless you go to the code of it and try to understand it. So we should add helpful comments to this function. Okay. Now, one very good way to add a helpful comment to a function is using JS doc. So you do / star and then / and then it will auto suggest you, oh, do you want to close it with a star and / and I hit enter, and now here we go. It does something. It auto does something. But what it does is it now tells you that you can have a parameter like this tag name. I'm going to say it is type string. Now if I go over EL, it says tag is of type string. We don't know about CSS class and ID attribute yet. So CSS class is also going to be a type of string, and the ID attribute is also going to be a type of string. And what it returns is a HTML element with assigned class and ID. Now if I hover over it, it returns an HTML element with assigned class and ID. And now this function makes much more sense. And we can also give it a description. Actually, I can say returns this HTML element. Okay, colon HTML element, which means it returns, and I can give it a description, create a HTML element with provided class and ID. Now this function has a lot more description. Now if you use it, you can read what is the description of it, what are the parameters it takes, and the type of those parameters. Okay, so we have successfully created our first function, and we have also enriched it by adding some helpful descriptions. Now every time you use it, you know about it. You can also enhance this. You can say space HTML tag. CSS class would be class for the HTML tag, and this would be ID for the HTML tag. So we have enhanced it a bit more. Now if I hover over it, there we go. And if let's say it is a complex function, or even in general, you want to give an example of how to use it, you can say example. A user can use it by doing const my element equals el, and then you provide a span element, comma, dummy class, and you provide dummy ID. Let's see how this looks like. Example, see, this is how you provide it, and it will return it will create a span with class equals to dummy class and ID equals to dummy ID. Now if I hover over this EL, there we go. Now any user who is using this function, they will have a ton of description and idea about how to use this. They will know, oh, you use it like this, and it will create a HTML element with this dummy class, dummy ID. Okay, and nothing in between here, of course, because, well, we are not doing anything. Okay, now any questions, anyone, so far? Does it make sense as to how and why we are using this, and how this is like, I know I've spent quite some time on the function, but I think it's much more clear now. You can create anything you want. What is a function, you know, how do you create it, you know, how do you enhance it, you know, and how it helps everyone. Perfect. I appreciate this. Thank you. And I saw a few things. A smooth tune. Okay, so there are some tunes being created. Oh, I did not cut it, but because, so comment inside a comment automatically gets cut, or at least like it looks like it is cut. So if I don't do this, it will not be cut. If I don't add that forward slash, and it will look like this. Now someone reading it, they'll be like, what is this it will create? But you know that if I show it as a HTML, not HTML, but more like a comment, this makes sense. Like, oh, this is just a comment that it will create this. So I did not do that strike through. It automatically happens based on my IDE, but that is because it's a comment in, sorry, this part, this part is a comment inside a comment. Okay, all of this is a comment, a JS doc comment. Okay, JavaScript documentation comment. Perfect. So now we have done this, if this, and now I can remove these 3 lines because, well, we have created a function. And we can do that for mostly everything. So I can copy this EL. JS doc. It's called JS doc. Okay, cool. Yeah, labels left side. I'll comment this out, and I'll say const labels left side equals to EL. And we know that we have to create a div, which is done, but the class name would actually be this labels left side. And I'm going to give it an ID of labels left side 1. Okay, I keep using 1 because it's easier. Okay, perfect. Now ruler spacer, let me comment that out. And I know I want const ruler spacer equals to EL. I just need to replace this particular class name with this one. I'm not going to give it an ID. So let's remove that. And I can get rid of these 2 lines. And row label itself. So I can do const row label equals again EL with that. And I can take this row label and paste it right here. I can get rid of these 2 lines. Now, what we cannot get rid of right now is this append child, but also that is a single line right now. Okay, it's a single line, so that is fine. Now let's go and reload this page and see if everything is still there. I can see labels left side with ruler spacer and row label. Okay, everything is still there. I think it looks fine. Perfect. Let's go back. So we have created a JS doc, we have created one function, we have called that function multiple times, and we have also assigned this thing. Perfect. Now, what else? Grid layout is done. Labels left side is done. Ruler spacer is done. And we assign this one right here. Row labels need a, actually instead of row label, this will be row labels. Yep. Okay, so labels left side dot append child ruler spacer. Let me also add some comments. This is the outer grid layout. Grid layout container, and then we have the left column which will have the notes labels. Okay, container for note labels. And now, okay, not one last thing. Oh, there's a question. Where do we check it is made correctly? Oh, in here. If it matches this exact thing that I have, which is section, a div inside it, then another div of labels left side, and then 2 divs inside it with ruler, spacer, and row labels, and then closing, then it means it is created correctly. sorry, I was trying to answer this particular question. So that is done. Okay. Next thing. So the next thing is the notes that I was talking about. Where is it? So we, as I said, we are going to print these note names on the left column. Okay. So vertically, we are going to print these note names. We start from top, go to the bottom. Okay. So C3 to C2, sorry, no, C3 to C2 is what we are going to print it as. So top would be third octave C3, and then we'll have B2, A2, G2, F2, E2, D2, and C2. Okay, so we'll go top to bottom. Okay, higher octave, then lower, 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 lower. That makes sense, right? We go from high to low, not low to high, let's say. So we can do it in multiple ways, but we'll use JavaScript. We'll use the idea of JavaScript to ensure that, yeah, to ensure that we can kind of loop over, like we'll use the idea of looping over something and creating something. Okay, so there's a function. Oh, one last thing about function that I want to discuss. Function can be created, it does not have to be created on the top. I can move this function to the bottom of the file. Okay, after everything is done, I can move the function to the bottom of the file and it will still work. Okay, I reload. You can say you can see that it will still work. The reason is something called as hoisting. Okay, functions are hoisted to the top of the file. So you can think of it as, if when the code runs line by line, the first thing that it actually does is it scans the file and searches for this keyword function. Okay, I'm not saying this is how it works, but you can think of it this ways, that it first scans the file and searches, is there a function? If there is a function, it will take that function and internally move it to the top of the file. Okay, so the function has moved to the top of the file, so anywhere there is a reference to that function, it knows that you're calling this thing. I'm not going to move, like keep it down, because it causes confusion, but this is something to note, that functions are hoisted to the top of the file. Okay, I'm going to keep it on the top, but just to let you know that functions are hoisted to the top of the file, and you can reference it before you actually write that function thing. Okay, cool. I'm going to also like just minimize these so that there is more spacing for you all to see. The next thing that I'm going to do is create some constant variables. The first constant variable is going to be the number of rows. And I'm going to say it is going to be at 8. This is going to be, yeah, horizontal pitches. And then we'll have, of course, columns. I'm going to start with 16. Total number of vertical time steps. Okay, and finally our node names. As I said, we are going to go from C3 down to C2. So it is C3, comma, what is that? B2, A2, G2, F2, B2, G2, B2, sorry, B2, A2, B2, A2, G2, F2, E2, D2, E2, D2, C2. Okay, so these are our names for each row / note names. Uh, 2 and 3 refer to octaves. More info can be found on this link. Okay. Actually, let me put this as a JS doc comment. So now if I hover over it, I also see this whole detail about it. Okay, names for each row / note names, 2 and 3 refer to octaves. More info on this link. Perfect. So now if anytime you use it, you can actually get a detail of it. What we used? JS doc comment. I think you can also do something like, if I remember it correctly, you can do at link. Nope, not like this. I think this goes here. Yep. Okay. So there's no difference to what it was before. It just like right now it's all green because it's taken as part of the single thing. But you can explicitly say that this is a link and it just looks different, kind of. You will still be able to click on it. Okay, sorry. Cool. Just to confirm again, we have C3, B2, A2, G2, F2, E2, D2, and C2. Okay. Numbers 3 and 2 refer to octaves. It is arranged in highest note first. Yeah. In the order of. Okay, cool. So let's go down to our code where we wanted to call this. Yeah, here we go. So row labels. Oh, again, see, no one asked me, what is this? What is this notation? What is an array? I assume that everyone knows, but let's not make any assumptions. Let's talk about this. So let's take this, go over to our songmaker.js, click clear everything and hit enter. On this page, note names has been declared. So I'm going to say note names temp. Okay. Now note names temp is, let's try type of. Okay. It is a type of object. Everything in JavaScript is an object, but we know array dot is array note name stem. Is it an array? So it is a type of object, but you can also check if it is technically an array or a key value pair object by using this array dot is array on the variable name. What is an array in JavaScript? It is nothing but a collection of similar types of values. So this nodes name stem is a collection of strings. Now that string could be anything, right? It doesn't have to be just these C3, B2, A2, whatever. It could be apple, banana, chiku, jam, or whatever. Okay. Uh, it, am I not audible? Okay, cool. I was saying that this node names is nothing but an array of strings. Now, this array does not have to be just of strings. You could have numbers. It does not have to be the C3, B2 or whatever. It could be literally names of some fruits. It could be, let's say, ages of people. It could be names of events, okay, MLH events. It could be links of MLH events, right? It could be technically anything that we want. And the idea of an array, again, we are talking about notations, okay? We are talking about what pattern you should follow. So the pattern of an array, or uh, the significance is you use an array to group similar things together, which would be used. In this case, the similar things together are the names of all the notes, okay, all the music notes. So that is why we use a array. We are saying that all of these notes are going to be very similar. So instead of creating one variable at a time, for each node, I want to group them together and create an array. So I hope that makes sense. Like, we group similar things together in an array. Now, what if I want one element from it? Okay, because as I said, we could have created one variable for C3, one variable for B2, one variable for A2, and we could have done like what I want to do, which is create one div at a time for it. Okay, I could have done that, but I did not. Why? Because we are smart, right? You are smart, and I'm slightly smart. And in my smartness, I knew that, oh, I could group them together, use an array. But what if I individually want each element from it? So JavaScript provides us with a list, with some APIs, okay, with some functions, with some helpful tools. Okay, JavaScript provides us with some helpful tools, and these tools will help us to, let's say, extract one value at a time. Let's try out some of those. So I'm going to say nodes name temp does give me the 0th element, and it gives me the C3. Okay, uh, nodes name temp give me the first, it gives me B2. Nodes name second gives me A2. You see a pattern? I'm going 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, whatever. Is there a way to improve this as well? Yes, there is. Thanks to JavaScript, I can loop over each of them. So for each of them, okay, so for each which takes a callback function, uh, ignore what is a callback function for the time being, but for each I can give it a variable name note. For each note, console.log the note. And if I hit enter, it does print all of the notes. Okay, I also want to print the index of it, or what is the position of it. So I can do console.log index comma note, and it prints 0. At 0th position you have C3, first position you have B2, then A2, and so on and so forth. Okay, so what is this for each syntax? It is similar to a for loop. What is a for loop now? A for loop is nothing but a way to go over every element in an array. Okay, so I want to go over every element, which is I want to go over or check out the 0th element, then the first element, then the second element, then the third element. So we can loop over something, we can loop over an array, and there are two ways to do it. One is a for loop. I can say for, and then I have to give it a variable. Let's say let note equal to 0. Okay, we start with the 0th note, then the maximum we want to go is going to be notes name temp, which is my array dot length. Okay, so we want to go up until less than or equal to this length, or actually less than, and note plus plus. I'm going to cut this before we do that. What is the length of this notes name temp? It is 8, but I know that my numbers go from 0 to 7. Okay, so that means is that if I try to get the 8th element from this notes name array, it will return undefined. I don't want it to return undefined. That is why I'm saying that you start from the 0th element and go up until less than 8. Okay, so notes name temp has a length of 8. We saw that. So you go from 0th element up until the 7th element, and at every iteration you increase the number by 1. And now inside here, I want to just console.log. What do I want to console log? I want to console log the, actually, in not, let's not call it note, let's call it index, because that makes much more sense. Okay, so index is basically the position. So we are saying let index equal to 0. Index will be less than notes names temp dot length index plus plus. So every iteration we increase the index by 1. Okay, plus plus means we increase it by 1. So we increase it by 1, and now we want to console log the index and the element at that particular index. We know that we could do a square bracket notation. We could use a square bracket notation to get element at a particular index. So now instead of this 0, 1, and 2, which are hard coded values, we are going to use the word index. Now let's see. If I hit enter, there we go. It prints out everything. Perfect. So it goes from index and the notes name at that particular index. If I change it to index less than or equal to, then I will have the last one as undefined, because notes name temp at position 8 does not exist. Okay, that is why we went up only up to less than the length. So there is this one syntax which could be, let's say, 2 lines, or we can do the same thing using a for each. Both of them return the exact same value. Okay, so let's try to make some parallels. So the note represents this value, which is nothing but notes name temp of index. Okay, at that particular index, that is what the variable note represents, and the index itself represents what we did here. Okay, So anytime you're confused, just remember that you can just create a quick for loop and see what is a parallel to what. So this is a shorthand syntax for a for loop. Okay. So node represents the node names temp at that particular index. Okay, that particular index will be 0 1 2 3 4. You don't have to specify it. So we did so much hard work in specifying that you start from 0, you go up to this length, and at every iteration increase by 1. For each automatically understands that it goes like, okay, I'll start from 0, I will go up until the length of the array, and at every iteration I have to increase the index by 1. For each understands it by default. Magic. And this equals to and this represents nothing but a way of this curly brackets. Okay, so that is one way of representing this curly brackets, and this is a function. Okay, this thing is another way of defining a function. So we know one way of defining a function, which is function, the name of the function, and you can pass it parameters. So you remember our hello with name function, hello with name 4 function, and we know that we could have called it with this and it prints it. Let's try to write this same function in an arrow function format. So hello with name arrow. So the first thing that I change is, instead of calling it a function, I say this is a const. Then we have to pass this parameters, right? So we can do using equals to, and then these three things go in here. And then we do equals to and greater than symbol, which looks like an arrow. And now inside this, we can copy paste this exact thing. So now this function is called as hello with name arrow. Let me call that function. And it prints the exact same thing because, well, we have given it the exact same thing, but two ways of writing a function. The first way is using the function keyword. You give the name of the function, you provide the params in round brackets or parenthesis as it is called, and inside it what you can do whatever you want. Another way to write a function is using this arrow function, where you use the keyword const, give it the name. Okay, then you use equal to and parameters. Why this thing? Because you can use const to create my variable as well, right? So if you use just equals to and some assignment, then you know that you're creating a variable. But if you use equal to, then parenthesis, and inside it, let's say you can or you cannot. Okay, it's okay if you don't have any parameters here, that's also fine. But if you use equals to round brackets or parenthesis and then you use arrow, then it knows, oh, it's a function. Okay, so equals to with direct assignment is a variable assignment, but equals to with parenthesis and arrow is a function. And then everything else remains the same as a previous function. Okay, curly brackets. Perfect. Now we have done the exact same thing here. So instead of using a direct, you can use a curly bracket. If that makes much more sense, you can use a curly bracket and it will work the same way. When we don't add a curly bracket, this is called as an implicit return, which means by default it knows I have to return this value. Okay, and the reason why I use the word return is because console log prints it, but return actually returns the value to the parent. Whoever is calling that is like, it will return the value to that parent. So what that means is, so if I want to just say If I want to return these values as a, using our backticks curly brackets, and let's say I'll add a colon as well. And here I want to say that index colon note. And I now call, and I should have assigned it to a variable const my notes equals to this thing. Now if I type my notes, not a good idea. Should have, instead of doing that, I should have done a console log only. That would make much more sense than this. Yeah, this will go into some slippery slopes. Ignoring that, this is a normal return where you have to define the word return and then you can return it. The other way is using an implicit return, which is what I was doing here. Okay, cool. Ignoring that, I wanted to draw parallels between these two things. So if you use curly brackets, you will have to define specifically the word return to return something. But if you don't do that, you can just use implicit return where you do arrow function and then you don't use the curly bracket and you can return some value. Okay, just to show you quickly what it means to be the difference. I'm not going to print that right now. It's annoying. Also, I don't think this is the right way to print it anyways. Yeah, this won't be the right way to print it anyways. Only understand from here that if you use curly brackets, use return. And if you don't use curly brackets, you are doing an implicit return. Okay, that's the only thing you have to understand from those two. Ignore the printing part. Oh, there's a comment. Shall we have a break? Yes, we will in 15 minutes. Okay, don't worry. When I have 2 sessions anyways, and I want to take a break in between so that you all have some time to rest and think what we have done so far. Okay, coming back. So we had created our note names. Now let's use them. So I want to loop over the note names. So I can do note names dot for each, and I can say note or name. Let's say just name, note name. So for each note name, I want to do something. I want to create a row label. And you remember our function EL, which takes in the tag name. I want to create a div tag. And for each of them, I want to assign a class name of row-label. Previously, it was row labels. Now this is a row label, singular. Okay, each row label basically. And now for row label dot text content, that will be equal to the note name that is passed. So this is set the label text. And now row labels, which is the parent, we want to append the child, which is row label. Okay, so what have we done? We have looped over the note names. So each note name, we are doing a looping over it, and we are creating a div with a row label. Instead of div, I think div is fine because I want them on separate lines. And we are giving it a text content of note name, and we are appending it to the row labels. So if I go back, I should see everything that we have in our array. Okay. And if I expand it inside the row labels, I should have multiple divs going from C3 be all the way to C2. Cool. Higher to lower. Okay. So in our loop, what we have done is we are creating for each row label. So one at a time. The first time it would be just C3 coming in as an input. So for C3 note name, it will create a div with this particular class name, and the text content assigns this C3 keyword. So if you don't do this, example, if I comment this out, then it will create the divs, but those divs will not have the words, the keywords, or the names of the notes. Okay, so the text content actually assigns it these words inside. It adds these text content inside them. And since we are using a div element, which is a block level element, which means it is one whole row at a time, it has gone one below the other. Perfect. So that's our row label kind of done. Okay. What else? I think at this point, it's the best time to actually push all of this before we go into the CSS. So we do a git add all, git commit session 3. What we did was showcase all notes name or create divs for notes names for notes. Yeah, this is more helpful, right? We are creating divs for notes, and git push. So now you should have total of 8 commits. Okay, and finally, in this session, one last thing that I want to do is write some CSS. So we need CSS for most of our class names that we have created. Okay, we are missing CSS for nearly all of the class names. So we did up until divider, which was a spacing. Now let's talk about grid container. So what is our parent grid container? The grid. Okay, that grid already has a class name, if I remember it correctly. Oh, it doesn't. So I should give it a class name. So section 2 grid, I can give it a class name of grid as well. Or I could have used the ID. Like, yeah, you could do anything. I'm going to use the class name grid. I'm going to say that it has a border of 1 pixel, solid, and it is going to be a variable line that we have created yesterday. We're going to give it a border radius of 8 pixels. We're going to give it a padding on all sides of 10 pixels, and we are going to give it a background color of var, or actually let's go with lighter color. Let's see how it looks. There we go. So that is our grid. Does not really look good, so I'm going to go with a darker shade. Perfect. So we have given our grid a color, okay, a background color, a border radius, and all the things. So that's our grid created. For our grid layout that we had created using JavaScript, so this was our grid layout class. Okay, I'm going to say that it is a display type grid, and grid template columns will have each column of 60 pixels, and all of them are going to be one fraction, which means that they are going to have equal width. And between the columns, I'm going to have a gap of 6 pixels. And also, let me add a background color of pale violet red. That doesn't make sense. Okay, let's go to our grid layout. So grid layout, this is our grid layout, and it is currently just all in one. Okay, so this is all our elements in the grid layout, in the first grid layout. What else? The next thing that we created was a ruler spacer. Not element, but more like the class that we created. Mm, height of 22 pixels, let's say, and margin of 4 pixels top, 0 on right, 8 pixels bottom, bottom also 4 pixels, 8 pixels left. It will be a bit below. Okay, so the reason why it's below, because we'll have some column headers here. So this part would be kind of blank. We'll have this, and we'll have some column headers here, and this square kind of would be blank. That is why I've pushed it down a bit. Top, right, bottom, left. Hmm. So I can just do 4 pixels and 0. Okay. Uh, What is the next thing that we created? Oh, labels left side. Another one. I'm going to go over in order so that it makes sense. uh, Display flex, and flex direction is going to be column. Won't make any difference, but just to have, so you can actually note what am I referring to depending on these colors. So the ruler spacer has a background color of, let's say, red. Okay, so ruler spacer refers to this part, but the labels left side refers to this part in the UI, and the grid layout itself refers to this whole thing. Okay, so if I remove these two, you can see that this is the whole grid layout right now. So you can use background color to technically kind of differentiate between, okay, what am I even styling? Okay, so the ruler spacer on the top bottom, if I remove this margin on the top bottom of 0, the red should actually touch the top. Okay, so let's start with 0 and then we can change it. And the height represents, so if I give this a 2 pixel, it's a short height. 22 pixels gives it a bigger height. So 22 pixels, that is the ruler spacer, that is the red part. And then you have the pink part, which is the labels on the left side, which means we are targeting this particular bit. So I use background colors, like that is my trick, that use background colors to actually focus on what am I styling. Does that make sense? I hope it does. Like, it makes it so much easy, in my opinion, to focus on, oh, this is the part that I'm styling and this is what it will look like. Next one is dot row labels. It is again a display type of grid, and grid template rows, I'm going to say repeat 8,32 pixels and give it a gap of 4 pixels. Okay, perfect. So now if I give it a background color of blue, this is what I'm talking about. Okay, so the blue part represents each of them, and as you can see, there is now a gap between each one of them. Okay, so let me remove all of this. That was just for understanding, but now you see gaps between them. Now for each row label, I want some styling as well. You can say display flex, align items center, justify content center, and the color is going to be the text color that we have, and the font size is going to be 12 pixels. Okay, perfect. So now this is our individual column names. I can give each of them a border of 1 pixel, solid, var of muted, and there we go. Okay, so this is our each note, and I can give it a border radius of 4 pixels, and then it should be rounded. Okay, no one asked, but I will. Let's say, nah, 16 is too much. Nope. I think 32 is fine. Higher notes. Perfect. Okay. I was saying that no one asked, even though no one asked, I'll still share one quick thing because no one is asking me about what is grid and flex. So you can learn about Flexbox by visiting this website where you can understand what is this whole CSS thing about Flexbox. Okay, this is my go-to. So a Flexbox Froggy is like it has 24 levels, and you can read all about what is a Flexbox. It's a way to style or align things on a page. Example, if so, this is a pond and it has a display flex set, which means we are using Flexbox here. And if you have to move this frog over to the leaf, which is on the end of this row, you could do justify dash content to flex dash end, which will move it to the right automatically. Okay. Now you want to move this one to the yellow leaf and the green frog to the green leaf. What can you use from these Flexbox properties? So you can use flex start, which aligns item to the left side of the container, but well, we don't want it at left, we want it somewhere in the center. So if I do just center, okay, and you can also read like use the justify content property. So justify dash content, and if I say center, they actually go to the center part. What if I say that there is a space dash between these? So then it will give equal space between the two frogs, which is not ideal. What if I try space around? Then space around, it will give some space here, it will give some space here, and it will give some space between the frogs. So that is again, it does not take the frog, it's like right next to the leaf. This is right next to the leaf, but they are not on the leaf. And we do center, which takes them to the center. Okay, so this game will help you understand what is Flexbox and how it works. So there is this question. So Flex basically helps in alignments. Yes, it does. And similarly, you have a grid garden, which will help you understand how grids work. So there is a grid, there's water, and what you need to do is you need to water the carrots. But you use grids. So display grid divides a element or a page or whatever is your parent HTML element into grids. Then you can have the number of grids. So it uses 20%, 20%, 20%, 20%, 20%. This is 5 times. 5 into 20 is 100. So 100% of the width is divided equally in 20%, 20%, 20%. In columns. Similarly, in rows, even this is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and all of them have equal height. Okay, so 20%, 20%, 20, 20, 20. Cool. So 20 cross 20% and on all rows and 20% on all columns gives it an equal width for columns and equal width or equal height for rows. And now you want to move this water, which is at the top left, over to the center. So I know that there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 columns. I want this water to move to the third column. I could use the grid dash column dash start property and say that you start from the third one, okay, rather than the first one. Cool. So this will again help you understand grids better. Okay, now there are weeds and you want to kill these weeds, so you use poison. So this poison needs to go up until the last of it. So we can use, like we can say, instead of starting from the first one, you start from the fifth one. That is one way. Or you can think of and Google search, okay, how can I move something to the very end of a grid? Okay. So yeah, you could do that as well. And that, I see, is the end of my time. Let me come back on screen. Oh, you're welcome. I'm glad that you like these. I'll give you two more. Uh, Flexbox cheat sheet. There you go. This is another one which talks about Flexbox a bit more, or bit more theoretically, but with diagrams. So, example, you can read about what is a flex box, what are the basics. You divide something, like you use the keyword display flex to tell a container that this is going to be a flex box container. And then depending on uh, flex direction, whether you're going row wise or column wise, you have flex direction to define row or column. Row reverse, okay, which means it will start counting from the right to left, or a row column reverse, which will start counting from bottom to top. Then flex wrap actually wraps an element. You can see that flex flow is going to shorthand for flex direction and flex wrap together. So use the keyword flex flow, and you can tell it. So instead of having two lines where first line says the direction is column, and flex wrap is, yes, wrap the element if the spacing reduces, okay, you can just do flex flow column wrap, which means as the screen becomes smaller, things will go to the next line. So yeah, this is one CSS tricks flexbox cheat sheet. I'm not sure if there's a grid cheat sheet. Let's Google that. Oh, there is. Nice. What is this website? This is new for me. I'll share this one, but you all can look at the other one as well. Depends on you. So this is for the grid one. This highlighted one is for the flexbox, and I am up on my time. I'm actually over my time. So I am going to stop right here. Any questions, anyone? Let me also push this. So this is what it looks like at the end of session 3. We have our notes, we have like nice borders and everything. Let me just quickly push this. Also, just a quick note to everyone. Uh, yeah, I am going to give you some time. Quick note to everyone slash quick request. Uh, Please provide feedback. Cool. So let me share this in the chat. There you go. Please provide feedback for the session. Did you like it? Did you not like it? What could I have improved? Any constructive criticism, as I say, is always welcome. So this was Music on the Web part 3. Okay. And yeah, you can give rating, you can provide feedback, yeah, so on and so forth. I'm not going to dive too much into it because I want to give you time to rest. So if there are no further questions, which I think there are no further questions, uh, I'm going to give you some time. Let's join back after 15 minutes. Okay, let's join back after 15 minutes. I will start the session, but I won't be joining it for next 15 minutes. So have some quick 15-minute break, and we'll come back. And when we come back, I will answer these two questions. For now, thank you so much, everyone. See you in a bit. Cheers. Bye bye.